Welcome to the Heart and Science podcast. I'm Aarti Shah, your co-host for today's episode. And today you are in for a treat because I am here live with my fabulous co-host, Bill Coletti, in Austin, Texas, which is Bill's hometown. And it's actually my former hometown and where I went to college, Hook'em Horns. And we are going to just take a step back today. We've done 5 interviews with great entrepreneurs, hugely talented and successful. But we're going to just take a little bit of a bird's eye view and reflect on some of the key themes and lessons that we gleaned from these last conversations. So welcome, Bill. I'm excited.
Howdy, by the way.
Howdy.
It's not welcome. So howdy.
Yes.
Here in Austin.
Yes, howdy indeed. And I mean, I am a native Texan, so believe me, I know. So here we are to just talk through the last 5 conversations that we had. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna ask you first, Bill. Like, what was a big takeaway for you?
You know, the first one that comes up, and we have talked to some great leaders and great entrepreneurs, and are going to have more. I guess the biggest one that came up to me is this idea around transparency. What is transparency? I think that's a term that we all make up our own definition. We had one of our owners that was like radically transparent with everything. And that created fear in me when I heard the way they described it. And then I heard some sort of faux transparency that, everybody still gets weird about salaries and compensation levels and bonuses and things like that. And so I guess one big thought around is how transparent do I need to be? Does this generation of employees demand that? Does my old school take on not talking about salaries? Is that still relevant? And so I guess one of the themes that I thought was interesting and I want to learn more about is what's right for transparency.
Yeah. With transparency, and it felt like there were sort of 2 sets of rules, right? Mm-hmm. There was how transparent are we externally, right, with clients. Mm-hmm. And we did, we had one owner say that, she was very open to talking about money with clients and saying, how much do you have to spend? How can we make this work? How can I have your business? But when asked about, well, are you that transparent about money internally? It felt like it didn't feel like that would translate it, right? Mm-hmm. And to your point about salary, I do agree that, we actually have tools now like Glassdoor and Fishbowl, right? Where people are on these apps talking about their salaries. Yeah. We now, most job postings in states, or at least in California and New York, mm-hmm. require you to put a salary band mm-hmm. in the job description. Mm-hmm. So it's not even generationally. I think culturally, our conversations about salary are changing, and more people are asking, like, who does it benefit mm-hmm. to keep salaries quiet?
Yeah. And I think if you, I guess at a practical level, what I tried to do is had basically 3 bands, mm-hmm. And one that was, these are kind of dated numbers, kind of 150.
Yeah.
And then there was sort of a 100 number and then a 50 number, just gross sort of what different levels. And those all needed to be moved up a little bit. But they created that everybody knew if I'm in this band, that's what I make. Now, bonuses is where we made the difference. And that's where we incentivized people. And those were not transparent. Yeah. But everybody knew if you're an A, a B, or a C, or an account executive, a vice president, or a partner, in our context, is you knew, okay, person to the left, person to the right is generally making the same $5 a month that I'm making.
Right.
And so that was one level of transparency, but bonuses were not.
One tip that I would give some of these small business owners is I've seen some of the larger agencies, midsize and above, have audits. And so they bring in a third party who does an audit.
Different sizes, small firms, big firms?
Most of the ones that I've seen do this have been midsize to large. So they'll bring in a third party. They'll do an audit across, across the agency, just to ensure that there is no discrepancy or pay gaps between gender and race. And I don't know if they slice it any other way, but those are the 2 big ones. And then at least you can say to your employees, look, we had a third party come in and assess our salaries, and they did, deem that there was no statistically significant, gaps between, gender or race and whatever else you want to say, experience levels. So even if you aren't willing to go, if you're not ready to be transparent about even salary bands, at least you can tell your people that, hey, look, we had a third party.
I wonder if there's like a minimum threshold where that works. Is it under 10 employees that is harder to do because you have 10 data points versus better at 20 data points.
And you may not have two people with the same exact experience level or the same titles.
Yeah, and you have all these random outliers.
But I would think by 20 people,
absolutely,
you absolutely could do that, right?
In the mid-teens, I could in the mid-teens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. I think it also, at a certain level, headcount, you need that outside.
Mm-hmm.
But I would hope at a firm of a dozen or 6 to a dozen people that you could that there'd be enough trust and confidence, you could do it yourself. And do it yourself. You don't get the halo effect of a third party.
Right.
But I think we're not going to disclose everybody's salary, but we're going to share some trends or some guideposts along the way. So do it yourself.
Exactly. And it shows that the owner is intentional. Right. Yeah. They're intentional about this, and it's on their mind. So I thought that was a great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think this is something we should explore in future conversations as well, as how people are defining transparency and how much that'll differ geographically, age of the founder, the size of the firm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other big one that came up is team and culture. And culture came up, I think, in every conversation. We led it there, but I think it came up organically as people were kind of doing their bragging facts.
Yeah.
I think different people highlighted what culture means. And, you and I have talked about this for a long time, that, culture kills your strategy.
Yeah.
I've heard that phrase used. But that's like in eye of the beholder is my take.
Yeah.
And I don't think everybody's definition of culture is the same.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, culture to some people, it's the bar cart, right? We have a bar cart at 4:00. We have bean bags. Right. We have snacks. Of course we have culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought one of our guests talked about values and really made that central to her agency's culture. And I thought that
written down and repeated.
And I think she had 6, right? She didn't have 20,
well thought out and durable
and conversational. What I loved about the way that her values were articulated is that they were very much in conversational language.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very easy to grasp. There wasn't a lot of flowery, she wasn't trying to build something that was hard to really grasp what the meaning was.
But it's also a decision-making tool for her.
Yes.
That she could say, when there's a conflict or a fork in the road, default back to values help us make this decision.
And I think that's also a North Star for her employees, right? So when they're at a crossroads, they don't have to call her and say, oh my gosh, sometimes they probably do, but it sort of empowers them to look at the values and say, look, if I make this decision, it aligns with this value.
Yes.
So I feel confidence in doing that. And as we are looking to scale, right, you need to make sure that your people, especially your next bench of leadership, feel empowered to make decisions. And this is this is like a map, a compass for them to do that.
It's so helpful. And then we had these other conversations that felt like a little bit of an old school thinking on culture.
Yeah.
Culture is an event.
Yeah.
A cocktail or a Christmas party or a holiday, whatever the case may be.
Team building retreat.
And I don't want to criticize that. Those are good. Those are not bad things.
Right.
But they don't give you that North Star.
Yeah.
That we did a truth fall at the retreat doesn't really, to your point, instill confidence to make decisions in front of a client.
Right.
It doesn't really do that.
Right. And I think those are, like you said, that they're tools, right? But they're not, that shouldn't be the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I noticed was a lot of the owners, it felt like, to me, like culture is to some degree, like how it feels to work at your agency, like how it feels for both the employees, how it feels for the client to engage with your employees. And it felt a little bit like a lot of the owners were going on vibes, right?
Yeah.
They were just like, I think it feels good. People feel great about being here. But I would like to see a little bit more rigor at boutique agencies around assessing what it actually feels like and giving people, whether that's clients, whether that's employees, sort of a safe space to kind of voice their experience.
Yeah.
And
assessment's hard.
Assessments are hard.
Assessment's hard.
Yeah.
And so I tried it with 6 people
and
it was just downright weird. And it was just, this was an assessment of, I don't remember which tool we used. We used some tool that we paid $1,000 for, as I remember. And it sent you a questionnaire, and then the report came back to me, and with some open-endeds, some tick boxes, but some open-endeds.
Yeah.
And with 6 people, it was very weird. The feedback was, Bill, why didn't you just ask me about this stuff? Why do I need Acme Company to tell you what we think about us.
And you did surveys?
Yeah, it was a survey.
Okay.
It was a survey, and it was just weird. And then one year I did a Google form, a Google questionnaire, and equally odd.
Oh, really? Even with just, wow. Okay.
Far lower friction on that. So I love it. And I love the data because back at H&K and PSI, we did that stuff.
Yes.
It was great, but you had more than 6 data points.
Right.
So.
And I wonder what that threshold is, right? Is it 10? Is it 15? Because what I would want to avoid is a situation where people are constantly reading the tea leaves, right? Yes. Where they're saying, oh, well, so-and-so, I think the owner likes so-and-so, and I think they're getting, I've heard anecdotes where people watched who was being invited into closed door meetings with leadership or with the owners. Sure. And that's how they were assessing where everybody stood and, who was, quote, the favorite. And as much as I'm sure these owners would say that they don't have, quote, favorites, of course they do. Like, we're all humans, right, at the end of the day. And we're going to have biases for certain people, and we're just going to click and have better chemistry with others, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think what I like about having some sort of, it doesn't have to be formal, but some sort of assessment is it at least kind of creates a level playing field where everybody has an opportunity to express and voice, any concerns they have.
And one thing that I did that I found a tool, and maybe we can share it in the show notes. It was from a startup guy, is that he had 12 questions. And so he would do annual reviews or his quarterly check-ins, and he had 12 fixed questions.
Yeah. And
he would jot down the results and put them in an Excel sheet and then be able to track his own trends, but they were fixed. Because too often, bad habit I had, you sit down with an employee, how are things going?
Oh, no.
You get this obtuse, goofy thing, but what tools and resources do you need? Do you feel as though the communication for me is appropriate?
Right.
Do you think we have favorites here at the firm?
Right.
Are you getting all the opportunities you need? But if you come up with this basket of questions, ask them consistently over time, it becomes an assessment, it becomes an interview, and then you track it. That was the best way I did it, other than I fell victim to vibe. How are we feeling?
And vibes are important. Okay. Don't get me wrong. Vibes are important.
Yeah, but that worked well. The two formal assessment, even Google Jot form or something like that, Google Forms, was weird.
Yeah, and just to build on that, like, I love the fact that I love the 12 consistent sort of, pillars that you're looking at, because you do need to track them over time, right? And if there's a lot of turnover, you want to be able to track and say, oh, well, wow, like ever since 2017, I've noticed, we're doing amazing on this, and this has kind of gone down. I mean, I know most of the trades do a best agencies, best places to work and survey. And I don't know what the cutoff is, but I think any agency over like 10 people can participate. But again, don't hold me to that, because I don't actually know for sure. But that would be a first step, right? You can participate in that. And some of them make you pay for your results. Some of them give them to you for free, or at least a condensed version. So, I mean, that's one area. If you don't want to take on that.
It's a data point.
It's a data point, and you can do it year over year. And those questions tend to be consistent. The biggest feedback I get, or criticism I get of those, is they are long. And so so employees are like, oh my God, I'm pushing 85. How much?
And that's part of the weird factor.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Just related is one of the things that I think we should do with the podcast, and as we do this, is I'd like to get a sense of time allocation of how much what is the time allocation owners are spending. And so we've talked, a couple of minutes here. Is this assessment, understanding culture and understanding your team, is this 20% of how I should spend my time as an owner?
Right.
Or is this 5% twice a year? And so I don't, we're not there yet. Yeah. But I think that would be to try to get some means on time.
That would be really interesting.
Fabulous. Yeah, it'd be really good.
Related to this, right? We had a few owners talk about, the reality of people outgrowing boutique agencies, right? And I got the sense that they were very, their take was, well, if you outgrow an agency, our agency, more power to you, we'll send you on your merry way and wish you the best. I don't think that's how it plays out in reality. I think it is disruptive for your employees when somebody leaves, especially a high performer leaves. And it's incredibly disruptive for clients. And as much as the owners will go in and they'll parachute in to make sure that there aren't any gaps, and I think that's a smart thing, they should do that. The client feels it, and I've had clients say to me again and again that, you know what, we had to part ways with this agency because we lost this really important person, And it wasn't the same anymore. So we looked elsewhere. So, I think a little bit of a reality check on how important it is to keep employees and giving, especially your high performers, an opportunity to grow within the agency. It can really help you scale at some point, Yeah.
So many thoughts on this. So I think we need to categorize it. There's the voluntary and the involuntary. I think that's sort of one threshold question is that, let me agree with you that it's disruptive. It's disruptive for clients. It's disruptive for the team. Let me also agree with you that I want to be magnanimous. And if you don't want to be here, I don't really want you here. All right. And I'm okay with that. The challenge is that I would be fearful that our team and our employees know all of that and take advantage. That's what I'd be afraid of, is that I know, that it is so hard to replace talent and it's so disruptive to your clients. I'm going to hold you over a barrel.
Right.
So those are the things all going through my mind. And my default on that is that if I don't have a little with or without you mindset,
sure,
I can really make herky-jerky decisions about individual employees.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think there's a balance of, yes, it's a big deal. Everything you just said is true. It impacts clients. It impacts morale, if they're really popular, voluntary or involuntary.
Right.
But I also don't want anyone to think they're so damn important that the place is going to collapse. Because I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, no, I believe firmly. It always makes me cringe when somebody says, "Oh, so and so's irreplaceable." I don't think. I mean, I don't think the founder is
fault. That's a failing of the firm if that is true.
I don't believe anyone is irreplaceable. So I think going into that with that mindset, but I think being intentional about career mapping, showing people ladders on like, here's your next step. Here's what you need to get here. I think that is important. And if somebody does come to you and saying, "Hey, look, like, I did get a call from another agency and they're offering me a $30K pay increase," to not see that as a threat, depending on how the employee approaches you with it, right? I mean, if they, but if they just say, "Hey, like, can we meet somewhere in the middle?" Or like, "When am I up for my next pay increase?" Or whatever it might be, to be open and flexible, especially, if as the market changes, right? Because we have moments where our market is so hot. I had one moment back when things were on fire where somebody said, "I don't know, I started calling a theater company because I thought, they're performers. They know how to do PR, right?"
Right. I'll take anybody.
Exactly. Just warm bodies.
Right.
And then, moments like, maybe now still, right, where agencies can be a little bit more selective. But I think I would just encourage, owners to just pay attention to what's happening in the marketplace. And if things are starting to evolve, just make sure that your career mapping and your bonus structure and your, compensation packages are staying aligned with what's being offered.
No, and I think that's right on. One of the things I want to ask moving forward is a mentor of mine shared me this phrase, and then I've expanded it, hire slowly, fire fast. And I get my ego so wrapped up in the hiring process, ego as well as caloric spend. It is very expensive time and money and all that of hiring and then onboarding. And you don't want to admit you made a mistake.
Yeah.
And if we get over that, get our ego out of it and fire fast,
right.
I think it is healthier for everybody involved, as opposed to dragging someone along.
Yep.
Contrast that. And so these are questions I want to ask owners. You contrast that with a book I read where it says we subscribe to sort of submarine management, meaning we're underwater and we got 75 people in this boat underwater and we can't really fire people because there's no place for them to go. And so if you manage your firm like that, is that healthy, or is fire fast the healthier way to do it? And so it's something I'm curious how folks have had to deal with it. I've done a little bit of submarine management. This is what I got, and I'm just going to keep using them for as long as I can. And I've also just fired fast.
Right.
This doesn't fit. This doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm so curious to hear people's experiences with this as well, because I do think that you can, depending on the caliber and how experienced people are, right? If you fire fast too frequently, you're going to create a culture of fear. There's no doubt. Like, you're like, a churn and burn, like, I don't know, like, and then you don't want your next, the next person, well, the last two people in your role only lasted
boom.
For, right. So, I think at a senior level, I do think this is important, because at a senior level, there is an expectation that they should be able to come in and ramp up relatively quickly. And a bad senior hire can be so toxic to an organization, right? Nobody wants a boss who they feel like is not, pulling their weight or competent, or that's a bully, right?
Yes.
And so if you're in a managerial position or a senior position, I think that the fire fast, hire solely really applies. We're talking about a junior mid-level. I don't know that
you submarine that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a little bit. I mean, you may take a little bit of time to get them up to speed and really assess, where their strengths are. They may not even know. Right. Yeah. But yeah.
I think talent and people are a big conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
And we need to, and we're going to have more about talent and people.
Yes. One other thing I'll say about just retention is this phantom stock that a few people have mentioned.
Yeah, interesting.
And it's interesting because I have heard employees leave organizations because they have been really underwhelmed by their phantom stock offerings. And they just don't feel like it's worth the commitment. But then we've had a few people mention that, some folks stick around for that because if you're in your late 20s, you're looking to buy your first house, that 150 or 200 in the case of some kind of liquidation event might,
But it's a huge if.
It's a big if, and it's not worth it for a lot of people.
And I thought about doing it and decided not to do it because I said I was going to never sell, and it's pretty disingenuous. It's not even a carrot. It's a picture of a carrot. It's a picture of a carrot.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
It felt weird. And so that's why I never pursued it.
Right, exactly. And I think if you're very transparent about your goals and they are to sell, if you're like, hey, we're building to sell in the next 5 to 10 years, but offering someone, phantom stock with a big question mark around, whether this is part of the long-term plan. And I think that
what's that character in Popeyes? I'll gladly pay you tomorrow for 2 hamburgers today.
Yes,
like
right. Yeah, exactly. And I think most people are smart enough to see through that, right? So.
And it's not like some big attractional feature.
Right.
Think.
No, I don't think it is.
Yeah.
That kind of makes me think of experience, right? And at what point is someone, quote, ready to start their entrepreneurial journey, right? Do they, we've had some guests that have done their tours at all of the big agencies, many of which don't exist anymore. And some have even done in-house tours. And then others that, were relatively, maybe they had worked at a midsize or they'd worked at another boutique and they looked at the founder and said, you know what, I can do this myself. And they hung up a shingle. So what were your thoughts on sort of what's the right formula?
So entrepreneurship's not for everybody. And you gotta know yourself. You got to do a really strong self-assessment. I think there is a very valuable and beneficial career to be had at big agencies. If you want to stay and progress and you keep leveling up your skill sets, stay put. If you got an entrepreneurial itch, my comment is check yourself. But if you still got it after you've checked yourself, go for it. But go for it understanding that you're not going to get the same looks of clients that you got on day at the big firm. That was the case for me. And that you're going to have to kind of grow into that senior counselor role. And I know that was a big theme of what we talked about, high strategy, low tactic firms. And so I agree with the consensus that a little bit of time, I don't know what that is, 5 to 7, 5 to 1 to 12, whatever the number is, at a big firm is valuable. I think there's that. You learn systems and process, the way to do billing and back office stuff, but don't learn a lot of the bad BS habits that are there. But more importantly, the entrepreneurial adventure gets romanticized and it's not for everybody.
Yeah. I agree with you that there's obvious value in having, worked on a multinational account, right, at a big 4 agency. My only reservation is I do think that it's hard not to pick up some of those bad habits, especially as you're looking to scale, right? In the early days, I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs say, I'm going to do things differently. I'm not going to do all of that stuff that I saw, at my big agency. I'm not going to repeat that. But then as they start to grow, that's all they know, right? And they do revert back to, well, this is just how things are done. And I I have found that some of the entrepreneurs who just don't know better because they haven't worked in some of these larger agencies tend to be a little more disruptive and are willing to challenge the model a little bit
they've
more.
been there a long time or a short time? Are more
the ones who have not, who are kind of coming into this a little naive, right?
Yeah, interesting.
Maybe they've only worked at a boutique, or maybe they've only worked at a small mid-size, right? Yeah. They haven't seen the big processes. The one thing that I find that those folks lack, though, is perspective. If they haven't worked at a big agency, sometimes they can overinflate their sense of what they're offering, right? And I've heard things like, well, we're the only people who are offering X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, no, actually, you're not. Like, I promise you that you and your 10-person shop out of New Jersey are not the only folks that are offering, some sort of, AI capability or something like that. So I think there's obviously pluses and minuses to both. But I do think that perspective that you get from a big agency is really
I think the general consensus is spend a little bit of time somewhere, learn something, and then jump on it. But don't, I waited until I was 45.
Yeah.
To make the jump. I wish, like almost everybody I've ever talked to, wish I'd done that earlier. Every entrepreneur I've ever talked to has said, I wish I'd done it earlier.
Right.
I've not run into a lot, but there's a few of agency owners that knew in college or knew as a teenager after their first paper route or whatever you do nowadays, then that they said they want to be an entrepreneur.
Right.
Yeah.
I will say that their life circumstances do play into this, right? Yeah. So, and I think a few of our guests mentioned that. And I remember, I don't know if you know Gail Becker, but she's now famously the founder and CEO of Collie Power. She was a longtime Edelman executive. And I talked to her about entrepreneurship. And she was saying that there's something to be said for late stage entrepreneurship, right? Because, there's a phase of life where you don't have a mortgage, you don't have kids, you're not paying private school tuition, whatever it might be, that you feel a little footloose and fancy free that you can start entrepreneurship. And then there's the era where your kids are maybe off to college. You've saved a pretty penny for retirement. And you may feel like, I've got a little bit of room now that I can experiment a bit. So I think those seem to be two important milestones where people feel like that. Like they can scratch the entrepreneurial itch. Whereas when they're in the thick of like raising a young child and they have flexibility, have great health insurance, that may be a tougher time unless they have some sort of external means to
do that. To support them, a partner. And I've got a client right now that has a partner with a job and a career that lets them now start their firm in their 30s with 2 kids. Yeah, and that's a different soft landing that I don't think everybody has the option to do. So the net, get some experience, learn in place, be conscious about the journey, that it's not the fantasy you think it is, but if you check those boxes, go for it and make it happen.
Okay, so now that leads to this to a big point, and that is a lifestyle agency, right? Because some folks in that phase of life may say, you know what, I need to start my own agency. I do have 2 young kids, and I need the flexibility. But one of my big takeaways from our conversation is how, if we ever introduced this idea to one of our guests that, are you running a lifestyle agency? I just felt like I just felt them close up and say, well, no, of course it's not a lifestyle agency, even if on paper it was obviously a lifestyle agency. And my hot take on this, I don't know if it's a hot take, is that, there is a negative perception to a lifestyle agency, especially thinking about how it would land with, again, your clients and your people. You do not, for me anyway, my guess is that they don't want their people to look at them and say, oh, wow, so we're just working to fund your second home. Well, that's not a great motivator. Or a client to have that same reaction to say, oh, wait, so you're not really committed to, what are you in this for? Are you in this for, for your yacht or whatever? So I think that word itself is quite charged.
So I think maybe some definitions are important, because I think what we're finding is when we're having these conversations, they self-define. Yeah. And so I think the context is, we have lifestyle versus performance. And are we building a firm for performance, or are we building a firm for lifestyle? I agree with you. People have a visceral negative reaction to this lifestyle type of firm. But I think that as words go, they're super valuable. And I think owners need to use those words to make decisions. Whether you go to the market that way, lifestyle can be, we are a super focused niche firm,
Right.
and we're only going to serve a handful of clients and do them really well. And we're not going to open up a second office or a second city or something like that. Then we're going to open up a digital shop. We're opening up an AI shop. We're going to open up, because there's this new trend. Those are the behaviors of a performance firm. Open up a second office. Those are a performance firm, bringing on a lot of employees. So I think you can get away. Well, first of all, I think you have to make the decision internally. You got to, as the owner, you got to decide, I'm building a this or a that. And then you can message it better in the marketplace on the why, on the why you make those decisions. And so as we've talked about this, I think it is back office, behind the scenes mind work that owners need to do. I don't think it manifests itself in behaviors that are contrary to success.
Sure.
You can be successful as lifestyle.
Right.
You can be successful as performance.
I mean, is this a high margin, low margin question, really? I mean, so if you are obviously building to sell, if you are sticking to 30% margins and, there's really no flexibility there, you're almost operating like you're a publicly traded company, right? Or if you're saying, you know what, I'm fine with 10, 15% margins so that my people can go home at 5 o'clock, so they're not working on the weekends. If we're really profitable, we're going to put that back into the agency, maybe hire more people rather than, So I wonder if that's a way to think about it. Because, we've had people, I know agencies that sold and they had to stick to 30% margin. If
because they had it historically?
That's what, that they had a 30%. That's what they built the agency on, because the idea was to sell. And the owners had a number in mind and they needed a 30% margin to get it. And I know some agencies that'll say like, oh, we do 10 to 15%, because we're building, we want to be a place that people want to work. We don't want to be a sweatshop. So I wonder if that's really the decision.
Yeah, I don't know. I was a lifestyle firm and high margin and stayed high margin and kept high margin.
Over 30%?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely. And it was fabulous. Now that was crisis, a little bit of different pricing model. And so there are those contexts. So I think it is a lens to look at it through. I think what I'm curious about is that I do want to lean more into the conversation with our guests to understand it. To your earlier point, I don't know better words, and I don't necessarily want to find better words than lifestyle versus performance. And let's just get over people's concern, but let's dig into the topic. I think it's a really legitimate topic that owners need to think about and be intentional. Just like how big a deal is culture going to be? Just like how big is a deal is transparency going to be? What am I building?
Yeah.
And I think it evolves over time.
I think it does evolve over time. And so folks someone who may be set out to sell, maybe will change their mind, especially if they have another exit plan that kind of emerges. Or someone who set out to not sell 5 years into it may say, you know what, I don't know if this makes sense. But I do, I think talking about what I think margin is a big part of that conversation. And growth is a given, right? Whether you're lifestyle or performance. And I think that's what's lost sometimes when you make that distinction between lifestyle and performance is growth is a given across the board. It's, but it really, to me, the nuance is
but how do you define, but growth can be measured by top line. Yeah. Growth can be measured by lots of other ways as well.
It's like, Bill, we could keep going, but I think we'll get a lot more fodder from our next conversations. Yeah. And we want to hear from all of you. Like, are there things that we aren't asking about? And what are your thoughts on lifestyle versus performance and that language? What are your thoughts on building a culture? Feel free to reach out to us. We'll have our contact information in the show notes. And if you want to be a guest on the podcast, if you're an entrepreneur yourself, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we did. We are very excited to find owners that are intentional. And we don't care what you're intentional about. But we want owners that are intentional. I think, there's lots of, also you hear this term in our industry about kind of accidental entrepreneurs. That's the bulk, people that sort of stumbled into it. So let's look forward to some great conversations. We really want to understand both the heart and we also want to understand the science. And that's the balance that I think is so wonderful what we're trying to build.
Absolutely. Well, join us again for our next episode, which will most likely have a guest on it. So stay tuned for that.